we are going to be making my chicken pot pie. I only have written here the roux portion, the starting of a roux, becoming a gravy type situation, and then I kind of wing it because I've made it so many times and I adapt it to my taste. But I will include the recipe that I followed, and if you follow the recipe to a T down below, it's a link from allrecipes.com, and I read the comments on allrecipes.com and I listened to them when they said to add more flavor and etc, etc. So that's kind of what I'm doing, but then I've just made it up as I went along, and this is one recipe that I feel comfortable doing that because I have made it so many times. Otherwise I'm very insecure and I follow the recipe to a T because I'm not a professional cook by any means. But I hope that you like it, and if you follow the recipe just as it's written down below, it'll be a 10 if you like chicken pot pie. This is a super, super 10. Because it says, it has the recipe, and then if you read the comments will say things like double the sauce or the gravy, whatever you want to call it, because they felt like there wasn't enough, and all this other kind, so all these other tips. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. This is the kind of chicken I use. It doesn't matter what kind you use. You can use chicken tenderloin, you can use chicken breast, it doesn't matter at all. And the way that I judge how much chicken I put in my chicken pot pie is I thought in the dish that I'm going to make it in. Many of you may have qualms about the way that I'm going to thaw my chicken, but I've done this my entire life and I'm still alive, and I don't let it sit out the entire day. So for about 30 minutes, I thaw it in hot water. So I let it run, and then I put as much chicken in that I feel like will fill up my chicken pot pie. And it'll shrink down a little. So I'm just gonna put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chicken tenderloins in there. I'm gonna let this sit for a couple minutes, then I'll drain the water because the water will become very, very cold. Then I'll fill it up with more hot water, and I'll do that for about a half an hour, and then they'll be thawed. I generally prefer homemade chicken broth, but I don't usually have that on hand anymore now that my husband is deployed because I don't eat as much as I do when he's here. I usually cook a lot. So I'd buy an entire chicken and then I would break it apart, save the meat, make my own broth. I found a recipe in a cookbook, and you can freeze the broth and everything too, but I don't use it fast enough, and America's Test Kitchen did some blind taste testing and they found that Swanson chicken broth had the highest vote as far as flavor. So I just use regular old chicken broth. You don't have to do this. I think the recipe says to soften your vegetables in water, but I love adding flavor anywhere that I can, so I use the chicken broth to boil my vegetables. Now, you can cut up your own vegetables, or you can just buy a bag of mixed vegetables. I think frozen vegetables are just fine. Fresh is always best. Typically, fresh is best when the vegetables are in season. If they're not in season, then you often get them at the grocery store. I'll wait. When they're not at their peak ripeness, and these are frozen right when they're ripe at the highest nutritional content, though I'm going to be boiling them so the nutrients are partially going to be leaving. Anyway, that's a huge rant for no reason. I think vegetables that are frozen work just as fine because this is going to be in a pot pie and it's not like you're eating it and you can feel the snap of the pea. You know what I mean? So I'm going to softly cook my vegetables in chicken broth. I have no idea how many vegetables I'm adding, but I would say, I don't know, the recipe says something, but I just dump it in to how much I think a pie dish will fit. I will generally, I'm going to use some of that vegetable broth in the pot, chicken broth turned vegetable broth, and I'm going to use it for the roux of the chicken pot pie, and then I'll freeze the rest. The broth in the pot is going to be more flavorful than the broth in the box now, because the broth in the pot will have vegetable juice in it also. I have made this so many times, so many ways, that I have sometimes used the Pillsbury pie crust, and it tastes just as good, though I do prefer homemade pie crust, and I typically do make it, but for the sake of this video not being hours long and the fact that I'm going to make pie crust in a separate video, pie crust is so easy to make, I feel like. Anyhow, I'll show you the recipe. I get it from America's Test Kitchen. That's the flaky crust recipe type pie crust that I use, but I have used these several times, and either way I make it, it's delicious. But I like homemade pie crust just a little bit more, okay? So I use these. There's 2 of them in here. You're going to need 2. I have my trusty Lodge. What's it called? I'm going to use. It doesn't matter what kind of oil you use, but I'm going to use canola just because it's flavorless, really, it seems like. Just a tiny bit. And I'm going to make my chicken. I'm going to cook my chicken. Though I have boiled it, and that's fine, but I just much prefer cooking it this way so that I can add flavor and not overcook it. I feel like I overcook it every time I boil it, and I don't want to overcook it, so I'm going to just... Is this every single one of my videos? Is this just my life? Thank goodness it was my saffron and it's sealed, right? Oh my gosh. Ah, dear. Where did all these glass shards go? Oh my gosh. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Is this real? Is this real life? So I need an apron that goes down past my feet is what is going on here. Oh my God. Is this a joke? Is this a joke? I just swept the entire floor because those glass shards went everywhere. The glass shards, I rinsed out the pot, I re-put the oil because there were glass shards everywhere, and I just swept this entire floor. What is going on? Oh my gosh. I have some canola oil in my pot, and I'm going to put the chicken. I've dried it off because I've had it thawing in water. I'm just going to season it with freshly ground pepper, some salt, some poultry seasoning, and some garlic powder. It's different every time I do it. I had a dream about Pam. I had a dream I found Pam spray. My mom bought me these spray bottles that I fill with the oil and reuse that way, but I haven't got around to filling them, so I'm just gonna take some oil and oil my dish like this. I'm going to take 1 pie crust. I'm preheating the oven to 400, and you can take your freshly made pie crust or just this regular old pie crust. And lay it down. And we're going to bake this first so that it gets kind of golden. Well, not, you won't really see it get golden unless you do an egg wash. Let's do an egg wash. Crack an egg. Put just a little bit of water. You can use a fork or you can just whisk it. I'm going to take my little brush and egg wash the inside of the pie so that it'll crisp up. It'll help it from getting soggy. I don't like pot pie crust to be soggy. I flipped the chicken and I added parsley to this side and some more garlic powder. And I'm just going to crack open one of them and see if it's done. Totally is. So I'm gonna take it off, put them in a dish. I'm gonna let them rest. When this chicken pot pie eventually goes in the oven, your vegetables and your chicken and everything will already be cooked. So it really is just cooking the dough. So you don't really have to worry about whether the chicken's going to be done enough and burn your dough because your chicken will already be cooked. I just dumped the oil out because it was just oil and I don't want oil in my pot pie, but I'm leaving the bits because the bits are fine. You take 1/3 cup of butter. I'm going to put my crust in the oven. I don't know, for 15 minutes? I can't remember how long, but I'll smell it. I just realized why the butter's not melting. It's because I turned off the heat. It asks for 1/3 cup of onion. This is more than 1/3, but I had it in the freezer pre-chopped, which is amazing. Somebody told me about when you cut an onion and you keep it and then you eat it, you'll get sick, and that's hoopla. And I've never been sick. I don't care to listen to that hoopla because I don't get sick, so I keep doing it. If I ever fall deathly ill from eating an onion that's been pre-chopped, I'll let you guys know. Over here on the counter, I have 1/3 cup flour-ish, and I'm just taking a quarter teaspoon pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon celery seed. And 1/2 teaspoon salt. So you can do this a couple different ways. You can shred it. I like to shred it because there's a piece in every bite. My husband likes it cubed so that he can feel the meat when he eats it. I think he thinks there's less meat when it's shredded, but it's just an illusion. So depending on your personal preference, I'm just gonna cube shred it. I'm just gonna kind of do whatever I want. Separate it into bite-sized pieces somehow. If I were to completely shred it, I would just use 2 forks and pull it apart. Like, you know, grab and pull. But I am, like, kind of doing in between a shred and a cube. I let it rest before I did this because if you cut the chicken immediately, the juices flow out of it and I feel like it loses flavor. And I know it's going inside of a pot pie, so it doesn't really matter so much, but I feel like every little bit helps in the flavor department and in the juiciness department. You want that bite of chicken to be wonderful, you know? Not just a plain boiled piece of chicken. So that's why I do it this way. Though I have done it the boiled chicken way, and it has come out delicious. That's why I give this recipe a 10, because I feel like it's perfect. If ever I do have a little bit of extra filling, that's why I don't really so much care to measure because if I do have leftover filling, I freeze it and I just add it to the next pot pie, or I just eat it with a piece of toast when I'm starving and I have nothing food ready, and I'll just let the toast soak up the broth. I'll heat it up on the stove and just eat the filling with a piece of toast as a quick, easy meal. I can smell the crust now. It's definitely cooking. Those are sauteing beautifully. Let me get a whisk. And add, I'm gonna lower that to in between medium and low. Is it called low medium? Medium low? And I'm just gonna sprinkle my flour. Mixture, whisk it all up. It asks for 1.5 cups of broth. I'm gonna take the broth that I've been making the vegetables in. 3/4 of a cup. And if I get vegetables in there, oh well, because the vegetables are going in there anyway. I had exactly enough broth in that vegetable mix. How cool is that? Oh, that crust is definitely browned. I don't know why I didn't take it out when I said I smelled it. I was distracted. So I'm gonna add 2/3 cup milk. Okay, this is nice and thick, like gravy. You can double the recipe. I just eyeball it and add more broth or more flour, more seasoning if I add so much that I feel like the flavor is lost, and then I just taste it. And then I put it on medium heat until it kind of starts to bubble so that I can test the thickness. Because at first it'll appear that it's still too runny, but as you cook it, the flour will thicken it and it becomes a wonderful gravy. So I'm calling that good. I'm going to just dump all of my vegetables and whatever little broth there is left in there, and all my chicken. I guess I'll just use my whisk and mix it all up into a glorious pot pie. Doesn't that look superb? It smells superb, I'll tell you that much. Let me bring my crust over here. Okay, as I cooked off my crust for far too long, it fell down and made a huge roll of, my word, a huge roll of dough. So I cut it off, and I'm going to start my top part by fitting it there. Does that make sense? I'm not gonna roll it over until I fill it, but I am going to connect what is wrong. Do you know what I mean? I'm just going to spoon some delicious filling into my pot pie. That's about full. And now I'm just going to lay it over the top. So I'm basically just covering it up. And then I will take the knife I've been using for everything and just cut some slits in it. You can decorate the edges, but I really don't care because it's not a pie. I mean, it is a pie, but it's not meant to be beautiful. And I'm just going to stick it in the oven. I turned it down to 350 because I cooked the bottom so quickly. I must have, I don't know what I was doing. Because I feel I cooked the bottom too quickly, I'm going to lay down my insulated mat in my pan just to protect the bottom a little bit. And I'm gonna bake it like this. I do also have a handy pie crust thing. What the heck is going on in there? And it protects the, why isn't it fitting? Is it my handles? I guess it's my handles. But I set this shield so that the edges of my crust don't cook as fast, because they tend to cook too fast. And before I had that pie shield, I would just crumple up foil around the edges. About 40 minutes, 350 degrees, or whatever the recipe says. I don't know, but I'm gonna take it out when I smell it. I can smell it. Okay. I'm not going to taste the pot pie because I'm not hungry, but I know that it's a 10 because I've made it 1,000 times in a kind of different way each time, and every single time it's been amazing. You can add more gravy if you prefer a juicier pot pie. You can make it heartier and thicker and just add more contents. You can alter it pretty much to your taste however you want to. And I promise with that roux, with that gravy base, with the celery seed, the pepper, salt, butter, flour, chicken broth situation, it's the best tasting pot pie ever. Whether you use the Pillsbury crust, I've never tried anything but Pillsbury. I like making crust on my own, which is preferable in my opinion, but if you do venture out for store-bought crust, I've only ever tried Pillsbury, so I don't know if store brands are gross. I have some kind of strange aversion to store brand foods most of the time anyway. Okay, so that's the chicken pot pie, and I hope you enjoyed it. I feel like I'm gonna make cookies tonight, maybe. It depends on how long it takes for me to edit this. Otherwise, I'll do them tomorrow. They'll be coming in the next couple days, okay? I'm gonna edit this, okay? Bye! About this crappy camera. This is my laptop camera. I just sent a text over to, do you guys remember me talking? Probably not if you didn't watch my Vlogmas. There was a girl named Jones, and she moved in close to me. She's a neighbor. And so when I made the pot pie, I sent her a text, and I invited her to come have some pot pie, because I like to share the food that I make. It makes me feel good. And then the text I got back made me smile so big. So if this doesn't tell you guys it's a 10, it's a 10. If you don't like chicken pot pie, if you don't like chicken pot pie and the only thing you've ever judged chicken pot pie off of was the frozen Marie Callender's or Banquet frozen pot pie meals, then you've never had pot pie. Please don't tell me that you don't like pot pie if you've never had it this way, or fresh, homemade, delicious. Because I've converted many people that say they do not eat pot pie, and they've eaten this, and it's turned into one of their favorite meals. Promise you that. Okay? So enjoy!